Hey guys, Ezra here and welcome back to Ezra Review. And on today's review, I want to talk about Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, which is the last Mission Impossible movie. It was confirmed recently by Tom Cruise. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Mission Impossible franchise. I think they're one of the best action spy action movie ever, and I think Tom Cruise is absolutely amazing as Ethan Hunt, except Mission Impossible 2, which is like a weird black sheep of the movie in the franchise, which is really, really weird. And yeah, that movie is really weird. But I feel like after Mission Impossible 3, the franchise got really, really better and it really found its footing, and now it becomes a movie where Tom Cruise is performing this crazy stunts. It becomes like a stunt showcase almost, and I love it for it, because like obviously in this movie we get the big plane scene as you can see in the poster, which is absolutely amazing. But I gotta say the last movie, Dead Reckoning, and this movie is a bit worrisome for me because I feel like it doesn't necessarily meet the standard of the Mission Impossible movies, at least from my expectation, because I think after Mission Impossible 3, where the series found its footing, we see that in Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout. I think those movies are absolutely fantastic, not just in terms of like the action and then the stun, but in terms of like the characters and the story as well, because they are really, really engaging. But I do think that Reckoning is like really like slopping a bit, because I feel like it was flopping a bit because the runtime was a bit too long, and I think the anime as the entity and Gabriel are a bit weaker, and I think it's just like yeah, I think the narrative is just like not really that compelling, and I think same thing could be said with the Final Reckoning, that I think the narrative are just okay, but they're not exactly super engaging, and sometimes they get a bit more convoluted, and I think it's just like man, like this movie could have been way simpler, and I think the runtime is also really hurting the movie as well, because as maybe you guys already seen like the review for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Then yes, all the review pretty much said that the Act One of this movie are the roughest one, and I agree with them because like again, it just features a lot of flashback and a lot of like clips from the previous movies, which at first I was like fine with it, but I feel like they keep doing it over and over and over again, and it kind of like overstay its welcome, because I do think that is a good way for them to showcase or like recapping the Mission Impossible movies, when Ethan like arrive at the meeting room, and I feel like that's like where the movie should recap the previous movies, but no, they keep doing it over and over again. I feel like it gets a bit much. But yeah, I mean, besides that, I do think people already mentioned that on their reviews a lot, which I agree. I do think the stunts, the submarine sequence and the big plane sequence are absolutely amazing. They are really jaw-dropping stunts, and especially watching them on a big screen is absolutely amazing. And the performances overall are absolutely great as well. Tom Cruise, simonpegg, vingrhames, and Hayley Atwell, it's herself, like everybody does a great job. Angela Bassett also came back, from Mission Impossible Fallout, which is good, but I do think there is I kind of wish that our character could do a bit more, I guess. I don't know. I feel like this movie has so many characters, and I feel like not all of them get enough screen time, and I think this is like the result where I don't think Christopher McQuarrie does a bit too much with the character, and I feel like I know that every single Mission Impossible movie, he wanted to improve the storyline and then improve the characters as well, which also meant to increase the characters in the movie, and I feel like it's a bit much. And also like the story arc for some of the characters' relationship are a bit half cooked, you could say that, because there is a reveal with Shay Wingham characters, that I did not see that coming, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a cool reveal for who his character actually was, but I feel they didn't really do anything interesting with this reveal, especially by the time you get to the end. I was like, oh, okay, well, what's the purpose of for revealing his identity, and I feel like I don't know why would you do that, because I feel like it could be interesting, and I feel the movie tried to build up something interesting there, but again, it doesn't really lead to anything substantial in the story itself, and I think it was disappointing. And Yeah, I mean, like again, the legacy character like Ethan, Luther, and Benji, I think the movie does handle these three characters really, really well, you know. But I have a complaint about Hayley Atwell's character Grace. You know, well, I do love Hayley Atwell. I think she does a fantastic job in this movie, you know. But I'm not really fond for her characters, you know, because like after you watch the, you know, the Final Reckoning, at least for in my mind, I was just keep thinking about Rebecca Ferguson's character Elsa Faust. You know, because again, spoilers, they kill Elsa in Mission Impossible 7, which I think is a huge mistake because I think Elsa Faust is such a great character, you know, from 5 to 6 to 7, you know, and I think they've been really consistent with Rebecca Ferguson's characters, you know, and I think with the Final Reckoning, every single time I see Grace in this movie, I just can't help to compare her to Elsa Faust, and I feel like her character doesn't necessarily needs to be Grace, you know, like doesn't like I feel like Grace doesn't have like a big substantial role in the Final Reckoning, you know, that makes me that convinced me that oh like this role only works with Hayley Atwell's characters, you know, and not Rebecca Ferguson's characters. You know, like no, like I feel like you could replace this character with Elsa Faust, and it probably would make a much better movie in my opinion. Especially how everything end, you know, in the end of this movie, I feel like it could have been way better if this character was actually Elsa Faust, you know, because Grace are just an okay characters, you know. But again, we only met her in the last movie, and I think killing Elsa is a huge mistake in my opinion. I know some people might disagree with that, but I think Rebecca Ferguson is such a great addition to the franchise, you know, ever since the fifth movie, and I'm so glad they're bringing her back to the like the sequels, you know. And I think it was disappointing when they killed her in 7, you know, and I kind of wish that by the time you get to the 8th Mission Impossible, I'm finding myself missing Elsa Faust, you know, because I do think her character is way more compelling in my opinion compared to Grace, you know, and you could pretty much replace Grace with Elsa and nothing would change, you know. I think, you know what, something would change, which makes me really care about more about the characters relationship, you know, because I think the Grace relationship with Ethan's team are okay, you know, but imagine if this was actually Elsa, then I think I would care a lot more for the characters. So that's with, you know, the relationship with other characters, you know, because she's been with us since the 5th movie, you know, and I think it's such a huge mistake for killing her off in 7, you know. Again, I know I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but again, I think it's a huge mistake in my opinion, you know, and I think people will definitely feel that when you guys are watching the Final Reckoning. I think you guys will miss Rebecca Ferguson's character Elsa Faust definitely, and then you're probably gonna be thinking that well, they shouldn't kill her off in 7, and they could just continue the storyline in the Final Reckoning, and it could have been a great ending for her characters, you know. But no, we don't get that, so it really sucks, you know. But either way, besides that, you know, I think also I want to praise the action sequence, especially the hand-to-hand combat, you know. But I think this movie has the best hand-to-hand combat in a Mission Impossible movie, you know, because like the previous Mission Impossible movie had a has like a hand-to-hand combat, you know, which I think they are good, but they're not like impressive, you know, compared to the Final Reckoning, where I think the hand-to-hand combat is actually the best one in the franchise. And again, it's amazing when they are happening on the screen, you know. So yeah, overall, I do enjoy the Final Reckoning, you know, but I do think this is like a bit weaker Mission Impossible movie, you know, and I was expecting a bit more from the movies, you know. Yeah, I think if you go for the stunt and Tom Cruise, then yeah, you're gonna be satisfied, you know. But I think the runtime, Act 1, the flashback, you know, killing Elsa's character is, you know, it's a huge mistake. And again, you felt the damage in this movie. And yeah, I don't know if people gonna come out loving this movie, to be honest, you know. I think the review from the fans is probably gonna be a bit more mixed, you know, where it's gonna be like, yeah, it's a good movie, but when you are seeing a Mission Impossible movie, you are expecting greatness in it, you know. And rightfully so, you know, from Mission Impossible 3, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout, you know, they've been really consistent, you know, and the plot was always complex, you know, but it was engaging. These two movies are super long and they're not that engaging, you know, throughout the entire movie. And I pretty much have to force myself to be engaged at a certain point because like the characters just keep doing exposition like a lot, you know. And I think that really dragged the movie down a little bit, you know, because I think you could cut some of the runtime in this movie and you could make like a tighter storyline and a better villain, you know, because I think Gabriel in The Reckoning and Final Reckoning just, I don't know, like he's not interesting, you know, so it really sucks, you know. And the plot with the entity about this movie as well is also like, yeah, at first I was like a bit more open-minded in Mission Impossible That Reckoning, you know, that I think the payoff might be interesting, you know, but the Final Reckoning I was like, well, here's what the entity will do. And I was like, well, the 80s movie already done this. The sci-fi 80s movie already did this. And I think you guys know what movie I'm talking about here. So it's like, oh, all right, well, not that different, I guess. And I was kind of disappointed how the entity plan actually was. I was like, oh, of course you're gonna do that. It's really, really predictable. So that part was kind of disappointing. But either way, I still think this movie is still enjoyable. I think people will, if you guys are a long time of Mission Impossible fans, then I think you guys will enjoy this movie, But I don't think this is the best Mission Impossible movie. I think people will be having a huge complaint about the runtime, Act 1, and killing Ilsa Faust, the way they handle the villain, the entity. I think people will be criticizing that a lot, because it deserves to be criticized, because I think the payoff are not that good, But anyway, guys, I want to talk about a bit of like a spoiler reviews, for this movie, because I think people already reviews this movie a lot, so I kind of want to talk a bit about the spoilers, Let's start with how the entity plan, which I think you guys probably already predict that in the non-spoiler review, that yeah, the entity is basically Skynet. This basically become like the Terminator plot point, and I think that was really disappointing, And Gabriel in this movie just becomes like a really mustachy villain, because like he's just evil for the sake of being evil, because I don't think we have enough character development between Gabriel and Ethan, Like I cannot believe they bring back, like, oh, Ethan Hunt has a past, and then Gabriel was actually there, and I thought that they're gonna reveal something interesting in this movie, but Gabriel barely appears in this movie, and then the way he dies in the end is so funny in my opinion, where he was hanging off in the bib plane, and then like he said to Ethan Hunt, hey, only one of us has parachute, and then he let go like his seat in the plane, and then like he prepared to use the parachute, right? So like he flew backwards into the plane, and then he hits like the plane's like tail or something like that, and like it kind of like slices off his face, and I feel like, oh, okay, he killed himself. Wow, funny, like it was funny, like more like my tears laugh, when Gabriel dies, but I feel like it is such a comical villain, and a comical way to die, and I feel like they realized that. I think Christopher McQuarrie realized that they don't really he doesn't know what to do with Gabriel's counters, so that's how they're gonna handle his counter, and I think it was disappointing, because I feel like Gabriel could be much more interesting, especially with the tie-in past between Ethan and Gabriel. I thought they're going to use that to their advantage in this movie, but they barely used that. They barely mentioned the connection between Ethan and Gabriel in this movie, and it is such a weird thing to do, because I think the Reckoning kind of give that connection, and I feel like maybe they're gonna pay that off in the Final Reckoning, but they don't do that, and I think it was such a weird. Also, I want to talk about the ending, and how I think the ending would have been much better if Ilsa Faust was still alive, because here's the thing. I think this is indeed the final Mission Impossible movie now, because Tom Cruise did a recent interview with the Hollywood Reporter, and they basically reported that, yeah, it's called the Final Reckoning. There's a reason why it's called the Final Reckoning. Like, this is truly the last one, because I don't think this movie will make any profit, because again, this movie budget was like 400 million, so like I don't think this is gonna make any single profit, to be honest with you guys, especially with a long runtime, it's like, yeah, no, I think it's gonna have a great opening weekend, but I don't know how it's gonna hold up to the box office performance of Fallout, because I don't think they're gonna top Fallout, in terms of like the quality and the box office performance, because especially how this movie is it's a mixed review in my opinion, so I don't think the box office performance will be like super, I don't think this movie is gonna reach $1 billion, I don't think so. Even if it does, I don't think that's profitable enough, because again, this movie's budget is 400 million, and that's a lot, and again, I think the way they're gonna end this movie, which they definitely did end this movie, I feel like it could have been way better, because like here's the thing, Grace's character in this movie, every single time she appears in this movie, I just keep thinking to myself that this could have been Ilsa. That character could have been Ilsa Faust, and it makes sense, because I think Grace and in this movie has nothing to do, or I guess like has nothing unique about her characters that make her different compared to Ilsa, because like every single line of dialogue that she says in this movie, to Ethan Hunt himself, I was just like, damn, this character could be Ilsa Faust. You could just replace her with Ilsa, and it could have been way better, especially with the ending where the team kind of like goes to their separate ways, and I feel like in the end there, Tom Cruise character Ethan Hunt also go to basically just go away, basically concluding his final mission, and I feel like I can only imagine myself that, oh, if this was actually Elsa Faust, then Elsa and Ethan, they both can go off together into the sunset, like there is a huge, oh my god, there is like such a huge missed opportunity to do, because I feel like Grace character are just there in the end of the movie, and I was like, okay, cool, I guess, but imagine if this was Elsa, if that character was actually Elsa Faust, and just imagine Ethan and Elsa actually, maybe hold hands together, and then they just went off, to the sunset, and then like, maybe maybe live happily, who never, and it's just like, yeah, I feel like I kind of want that ending, to be honest, because I think that will make the movie much better, in terms of the ending and the characters, so yeah, that is a huge missed opportunity in my opinion, and also the way they handle Luther's death, I think it does linger on throughout the rest of the movies, and I feel like it was okay, the way they handled that, but I don't know, I feel like for some legacy character, I kind of wish that he dies in I don't know, like maybe later on in the movies, then maybe I don't know. I feel like the death was kind of like okay, and when Luther dies in this movie, I was like, okay, like that's sad, but I don't know, there's this feeling that I got that I feel like this death is half baked in my opinion, because I was expecting a bit more from Luther, because I feel like when he dies, I was like, man, I wish there's a bit more of his characters in this movie, and I wish the death was a bit more, I guess, meaningful in my opinion, compared to just like getting trapped underground and trying to stop the bomb, So yeah, I don't know, that's just me. But either way, guys, that's the spoiler review for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Let me know, guys, in the comment section below, like what do you guys think about the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, like how would you rank the Mission Impossible franchise, is this like the worst Mission Impossible movie, because some people might think so, to be honest, but let me know your opinions about that, and which one do you guys like more, is it Death Reckoning or the Final Reckoning, so yeah, let me know your opinions in the comment section below, yeah, if you enjoyed this review, then make sure, guys, if you choose to accept it, then subscribe and leave a like, share the videos, do some stuff, and stay tuned for more reviews in the future, guys, and again, I hope you guys enjoy this movie review, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye.